Hi everybody, Joe here. Welcome back to another episode of the Tester and Development Screencast. In this video, as always, we are gonna continue working where we left off in the previous video, but just before we get started, I wanna repeat myself with something that I said in the previous one, which is, I might not be able to ship weekly episodes during this period of the year, which is New Year, holidays, blah blah. So beware of that. And another thing that I also want to point a little attention to is also something that I mentioned in the previous episode, is the name of this people section that was intended to be friends section. So I still have it as a little demon threat in my brain that constantly bothers me. So I do want to do this renaming, but I don't want to do that right now, and maybe I don't want to do that on the camera because it's a boring thing to do. So I might do that renaming, but because of a good practice that I personally want to do is to write it down somewhere, I'm gonna add it in our to-do list, and then we can continue working where we left off. So let's switch the code, and here is our to-do list. So the friends section, rename the people section to friends. Yeah, that's something I wanna take a look at. Now, let's see where we were. I'll just select my micro tests and run them to see if everything is still fine. I did some updating, I guess. I've updated some dependencies, but I think everything is still fine. Now, what we have is we started working on the 0-1 many. That's the part of the zombies that we started with, and I explained in the previous episode why it is a good approach to get started. But we didn't do much refactoring here, so maybe I'm seeing some things here that we might want to address before we proceed working further. So let's see. So here we are focusing on the output that is sort of the more desired output. So what was the focus of this video will be the not so common kind of output. I don't want to say error cases or like negative path or that kind of things, because those are just regular things that can happen. So it's still an output, valid output for the user. We just have to inform the user that something wrong happened, which are the exceptional situation, that kind of things. But again, it's just an output. So we are going to be focusing on that sort of different output. But before that, as I said, let's do some refactoring. So here we have no people existing for Sarah ID. But here I see that we don't have, we are not saying explicitly here in the else that if it's Sarah, it's gonna be empty. So let's make that explicit. Sarah ID. This is not necessary step to do, but from experience I know it's gonna be way easier to do little refactoring later on, when we have this, like, if we are as specific as possible for a particular test, it's better for refactoring later. If it's too generic, it might end up into like more sort of we'll have to do more triangulation, more that kind of thing. So that's why I'm saying it's better if it's easier, let's say more convenient to have it more specific. Let's check that in. Make the empty the 0 output more specific. So then I see here like friend Anna, friend Sarah, friend Tom is equal to friend. Okay, I know it is a friend, so maybe let's do this refactoring here. Just name this Tom, name this Sarah, name this Anna. So we have Anna, Sarah, Tom is a friend, which is a user, and then here let's check this in first. So what I've done is I do the same that I have in the if. So I have Tom here, so again, I'm spotting here a duplication. I have TomTom. That's good. We are gonna deal with it later. Let's do baby steps. Do one thing at a time. Improved names. Removed duplication. How did I remove duplication? Well, the duplication in the names is also duplication. If I have something friend, something friend, something friend, again, that friend, friend, friend is sort of duplication that I want to address. Another thing that I see here is this is follow we, which is like when I have these true, false, like booleans, it's not very clear what they are standing for. So it's clearly a primitive obsession for sure, but it's even worse when there is a flag and you don't know what's that for. But we have this is follow we thingy, so maybe we can just put that named argument. It's great that we can do that in Kotlin. It's gonna make the things easier. Oops, something, yeah, I think I did also a formatting there. So let's do one thing at a time. Running the tests, make sure everything is still working fine. It does. And well, I can do the formatting and include that also in the same commit. I think it's not a problem. So let's check that in. So what I've done is use leverage the named arguments to make the flags clearer. And then on the left side, if I take a look, we can also remove a little bit these duplications. So essentially I can inline this user. So I have Tom friend. I can also, well, let's do the renaming later. First the inlining. And here I have friend Anna, friend Sarah, friend Tom. Let's see, everything should be still working fine. Let's go ahead, check that in. Inlined field. And then do the renaming. So we have here, let's say, Tom is follow we false. Anna, Sarah, Tom. So we can clearly start seeing now some duplication between the tests, but also what is more essential is this duplication between the data in the test and the data in the view model, in the production code, in the shipping code. So basically that's a good thing, because like our ultimate goal is to during the refactoring to push this data that we are having on in the production code up the call stack, which is more towards the tests. So we are gonna eliminate that duplication that way, and as I said, the ultimate goal is to have in the production code only abstractions and also align the abstraction levels. And we are gonna do that by just doing simple refactoring, baby steps, extracting functions, aligning levels of abstraction, see what things want to be together, which things don't want to be together, and how we can achieve single responsibility principles, that kind of things. And the last thing, so let me check this in. I think this should work. And check this in. Again, improved names, made duplication more obvious. And here I would also use the named argument to make the things cleaner. It works. And now I can just say again, leverage the named arguments to make the flags clearer. Nice. Now we can focus on these different sort of output as we saw in the I mean I think I've explained the zombies in the talk. I think you can find I gave a talk previously this year on the first International Test-Driven Development Conference, where I spoke a little bit about the zombies, but also if you Google TDD zombies, the first article that you will find, you can find out what the zombies stand for. It is the cases, I think I explained in many times so far, is the 0, 1, many, boundaries, exception, interfaces, exceptional situations, that kind of thing. So we are gonna start moving towards those now. So because here we have the 0, the 1, the many. We don't have loads, for example, which is the pagination, but that's something that we're gonna deal later on. Essentially when we will start connecting to a backend. Now in my tests, I think in the people, I can start a new test case. I like this separation of the tests. I think we've done that so far, and I've explained this. I want each test case to focus on specific things. So for example, load people test is like having all this, again, this similar output where we have like either we have people or we have no people, but I want to have different test case where I'm gonna have sort of different output where people are not involved, but some other thing, like I don't know, I am offline, I have a backend exception, those kind of things. So essentially what happened, I failed loading the people, failed loading what I wanted to load, so I'm gonna have a different output. So fail people loading tests. If I remember right, that's the naming that I'm using also for the for the timeline. Fail timeline loading, exactly. So fail people loading. So that's I like this symmetry. I want to have these things, like if I name one thing, if I rename, I'll rename all of those. So I'm gonna have like sort of similar naming convention. Now let's see. First, do I want to refactor something on the right side? Before I start writing more tests, I can ask myself whether I want to start doing some refactoring. I could. But I think that the data that I'm dealing with here is quite simple, and I see how this will evolve further on. So I'm just gonna add different, so the key is the user ID that comes, and for different key I have different outputs. So I'll just keep adding else ifs here. What I can do, I can start refactoring, and again, the idea is to push the data up the call stack, and the approach that I am personally taking to do that is like group the data together and then see whether it wants to live into some sort of abstraction together, and then because it's easier to push one single thing up the call stack rather than everything, like all this data. So if I group it into something and then push, that's gonna be easier. Then I can already sense what I want to do. So I like the refactoring that I would do right now is to separate the data from the abstractions so that I can have like this separation, and then that's gonna be the first step. But I feel like maybe I can add a tester or two for the error cases. Again, they are not error cases; they are just different sort of output, and then proceed with more refactoring. So I think, yeah, because it's not gonna add too much more. So I'll just add more tests. And the first test would be what happens when I have, let's say, an error. So I'm trying to fetch for a particular user, and the backend says, I don't know, some backend error happened. So what happens when I have a backend error? When I have a backend error, let's leave the assertion here. And the assertion is gonna be people state what was it in the previous test? Yeah, people state, and then backend error. That's gonna be my view model, people state value. Now let's make this compile. So the assertion is what I want to read. This is good enough. So I just get backend error. That's gonna be the output, basically the state in my people state in the view model. What's the backend error? Let's create an object into the thing that we already have. And the backend error is gonna be an object that will derive from the people state. And that's about it. Nothing too much. And the view model is gonna be my people view model. And of course the action is gonna be view model, load people, let's say Java ID. And when I have this, I expect backend error. I expect this test to fail, and it does. It says it's null. It's not what you expect, what you desire. How do I make this work? Is I can just say here user ID is this. I can do mutable come on. It's gonna be the backend error. Now you see like some questions are starting to pop out in my head, and probably in yours too. Like why? What's the relation between this input and this output? Like why in the test it is not clear why this input produces this output? And also here in this test, it is not really clear why, for example, in this test, when you just read this test, and the test should explain that. That's part of a good intention of a test. Why Sarah ID is empty and why Anna ID is not empty. That kind of things, that's not clear. And that's when I say pushing the data up the call stack, we are gonna, it's gonna allow us to describe that in the test and make that visible, like why this input gives this output. So that's sort of part of having the data in one place in the, let's say, the tests only, and have only abstractions on the right side. We are gonna get there through refactoring with baby steps, but now bear with me. Now, as I said, I was expecting this test to pass, but it fails. And why does it fail? Because of the Android OS looper, our old good friend. We have to just extend this with instant task executor extension, and that should do it, and it does. And what we've done here is we can detect when we have a backend error. We can detect a backend error, but only as long as the user ID is this one. Excuse me. And now I can also add one more error case, like negative output, or like not very desired, not very common output, which is gonna be what happens when I am offline. And when I'm offline is offline error. I have to think. So my assertion is gonna be people state offline. That's gonna be my view model, people state value. And let's create this again. The same way, the same approach, just add another object into the sealed class. Instantiate the view model. and then do the action. Now I have to think for what input, how am I gonna model, at least initially, the input that will provide me offline. So I have to think about it again. It's something that I'll have to deal with later when I'll be dealing with this data that I'm and resolving this duplication. But for now, I have to come up with something that will force me to, let's say, figure out why this input produces this output. So I have to sort of have a specific input that will provide me with this output. I think the easiest thing it is to just have an empty string, because I don't want to make this user ID input argument here nullable. And that's sort of already taken care of with the type system of Kotlin and everything. I don't want to deal with that. So I'll say if it's empty, then it's fine. Of course, then probably I'll come up with a test double later on that I'll have to use instead of like that when I'll be dealing with making the intention of these tests cleaner, where I'll be able to say, okay, given that I am sort of, I have some sort of boundary that says that it cannot connect to an internet, then when that's the situation, that's why this is my output, and the input at that point of time, it will be relevant. But that's something that will come up later. And for now, I just have to come up with something that will allow me to write a test for this behavior, because I do care about this behavior right now at this point of time. Later on, well, when refactoring, the idea is to not break that behavior, still have it, still work with it, still handle it. That's the goal. And of course, now it is null because I'm not checking it here. So what I can say, again, else if user ID is, well, I can say is blank. Mutable people state value is offline. And that should make this thing work. And it does. So again, don't think too much. Don't overthink the things. Like, do think what you want to test. What's the behavior that you want to cover? Catch it in a test. Write the production code, but like, if it's something stupid, if it's something that doesn't make sense, that doesn't make too much sense, bear with it. Catch that behavior in a test, make that test working, as we do now. Now we saw that it was failing for a reason. Now we saw that if, for example, I change something here in the production code, I have a test that will fail and indicate to me that I broke something. That's the idea. Later on, you can do refactoring, you can figure out how to improve these things, because refactoring the test is also essential refactoring as well, to improve the intention, to improve the naming, yeah, so the tests are also leading things. They should also be refactored. You should be also taking care of them. And what happened here can detect an offline error as long as the user ID is blank. So again, I like naming this, I like adding these sort of little details in the commit messages, because if I read the history, it will tell me, okay, I started, like, I caught this behavior, but only for like adding this sort of stupid thing, which is a blank string here, and then I sort of improved it. Okay, I think now we're fine in terms of having here. So it's more than clear how this evolves, how this algorithm will go. I think we can start now refactoring. As I said, the goal is to push the data up the call stack, but the first thing that I can do in order to do that is to group the data. Like, whenever you, even if you're let me switch the camera. Even if you are working on legacy code and you have a, let's say, some sort of function, if it's a small function, doesn't matter, small or bigger, you are thinking how to start refactoring, how to approach the refactoring. One thing that you can start doing is separate the reads and the writes. So move the read up in the function, so all the reads, then move the writes if you have some sort of side effects, or if you are returning some values, and if you are compiling that return value somehow, move it down, so as down as possible. So separate the reads and the writes. If you have some logic in the middle, then that's a good candidate to extract another function, which might be, by the way, a clean function that is not gonna have any side effects. And then you are gonna have the reads, that extracted function, and writes. If you don't have anything in the middle, you can maybe start seeing patterns. I mean, regardless whether you are gonna have that thing in the middle or not, maybe you'll start seeing patterns as to how you can group this data, like let's say in the reads or in the writes, and how you can sort of separate the data from the other things, from the abstractions that you are gonna have there. So that's a good thing that you can start doing, and that's essentially what we are gonna do here in this code. So we are gonna separate the data, like move the data up, move the abstractions down, and then we can see how we can get, like how we can easily group this data into something that might want to be as a container, or something that wants to keep this data together, and then it's gonna be easier for us to do anything we want with it, like push it up the call stack, do whatever. Back to the code. How we can do that? Well, let's think about it. So the first thing that we can do is maybe separate, as I said, what's the read, what's the write. So here we are reading the user input, and we are saying if the user input is this, then do a write. Write is this line of code. It sets a state, even if it's internal state in the class, doesn't matter. It sets state, so that's a write somewhere. How we can separate this? Well, we can pull this out, and we can just we can have the creation of this people state. We can assign it into a variable, and then assign that variable to the mutable people state value. Now there is no, at least not known to me, refactoring in Kotlin in IntelliJ that can do that automatically for us. And when there is no such thing, how I approach it is create a duplication, so copy paste this thingy, but make whatever that new thing is. For example, if it's a function, move it down, because that's gonna be the last thing that will be executing. So you know that essentially you are switching the clients. Your client, so whoever is calling this load people, that's the clients. I'm changing the clients to use that new thing, and then when I make sure that everything still works, I can remove the old thing. So come up with new thing, change the clients to use the new thing, make sure everything still works, remove the old thing. Essentially, that's what you want to do. If it's a method, then you can come up with a new method, then change all the clients to use the new method, then get rid of the old method. Here I have one method, so what I can do, I can literally duplicate this, but I'm moving it down. So this block of code will be executed first, right? And this part will be executed second. So essentially whatever this code does is not going to be as relevant as the second part, because the second part is the output. So what I'll do is I'll say, I don't know, result is, and then just do remove this mutable people state value equals, just remove it. And move it down here. So now what I've done essentially is I've separated the read and the write. Run. Okay, what happened here is So there is an else that is missing because I'm assigning value here. I can just use to do. That's fine for now, because I don't think, yeah, I don't have a test to catch this behavior, and I don't care about this behavior right now at this point of time. So that's not an interesting thing for me to handle. So what I've essentially done here, again, I'm repeating myself. So I put the result, I separated this result creation from the write, and the write is like just setting the value to my mutable state. What I can do now is I can get rid of this because I've changed all the clients, which are right now only the tests, to use this new code, and that old code becomes obsolete. So let me close this. So everything still works. What I can do here is, again, you see how little steps I'm taking, very, very small deliberate steps to proceed. What I can do here is separated the reads from the writes. Next, what we can do next is how I can now group this data, how I can replace this data. I mean, the ultimate goal is to get rid of the data here in the production code, but I couldn't really do that at once. So the baby steps to take in that way is to group that data together somewhere, and somewhere means on top, because I think the easiest way is to move to put that data as close as possible to its usages, and I think I can definitely start, let's say, here inside the if, and then move it outside. So let me see. So basically what I have here is I have user ID, and for particular user ID I have different outputs. So given user ID I have different outputs. So it looks to me like some sort of mapping, like ID to something, to set of data. So that's something that I can use right now, and see how that's gonna go. So for example, I can say map of an ID to list of Tom. Now again, that's not as close to its usage as possible. This is as close as possible. I have Tom. I'm gonna be replacing. Yeah, let's see how everything's gonna evolve. So I came up with a map. Let's give it a name, and the name is gonna be people for user ID. People for user ID, and it's unused for now. So it is unused for now, and because it is unused for now, it should be of no consequence. So I'm not touching anything with this. So the tests are still working. So what I've done, I've added the user ID here and the result, which is this list of Tom. That's the result, into this collection. And what I can do now is I can read here, instead of list of Tom, I can say let's first assign this to variable, and now instead of saying list of Tom, I can say people for user ID get a value, and the value is gonna be Anna ID. That should still work. And now I can inline this back. So what I've done is I am reading now I came up with a container and I'm reading the value from that container. And I can do a commit, but the thing is that I don't want to. I can do all this, and if this is the first time doing this thing, probably I would do these small commits on the way. But because I'm sort of more or less confident where I wanna go and how I'm gonna proceed with this, I might skip these commits. It's gonna save us a little bit of time. That's also something that I'm taking in consideration. If this is if this is project that I'm gonna work professionally, probably I'll take my time to do a commit. And now what I've done, I moved it out from the if, because as I said, remember, I want to separate this raw data, this thingy, and have abstractions down here. So another thing that is yes, I have this Anna, get value for Anna. So I think here I can replace this Anna ID with, because this Anna ID essentially is the user ID, and that should still work. And it does. So as we can see here, inside my if, I end up only with abstractions. I don't have any hard-coded data here. Moving on, what we can do the same thing for this. So basically, this Tom is also the ID already tells us, hey, it is a duplication. I already know about this thing. So what we can do is we can pull this pull these two. So I'm just gonna make this duplication, so add more duplication, that's fine. So I'm gonna essentially add this duplication, and then here in this map I'm gonna add a Lucy to list of, and I have this list Anna, Sarah, Tom. Run, everything should still work because I didn't do much. I'm not using what I've added now in this map. Still I have the same old code here, but here I can replace this with people for user ID, get value, again user ID. So I'm making step first. You see, if I was going only baby steps, I would have first pulled this in a variable, and then use the Lucy ID to get the things from here. So here I would have, instead of user ID, hardcode Lucy ID, and then replace it with the user ID. So I'm, as you can see, doing some steps more, and now these things like skipping steps in a sense. And now, as we can see, these things are unused. They are no longer used. So what we can do, we can get rid of them, and we can do the same for Sarah ID. To empty list. And again here, people get value user ID. Nice. And yeah, so what another thing now, what I can do is I can see that the only thing now I am having here is this ID, like the checks for the ID. And how can I inline this? Basically, I can make a check on the people for user ID to see whether a user ID's part belongs there or not. So what I can do is I can say people for user ID contains user ID has has is known user ID, maybe. And I can do here, replace this with is. Well, first let's run the test, make sure I'm not breaking. I'm not, I know I am not, because what I've done here is not touching anything, but just in case. Is known. If I run, everything should still work. And now, instead of here adding is known user ID, I can get rid of this else if altogether. And this else if altogether. And now finally here what I can do is let's first check this in, because the refactoring that comes is I would have to invert this, because basically this thingy looks to me as a guard clause. So I can say if the user is blank, just don't proceed further. So I can move that on top, and then have an if else here, because I can also detect. Well, I can do this. Else if is known is not known, and that should still work. No, it doesn't. So let's back off. Yeah, as I said, it is a little bit more risky refactoring, so let's check in first. So what I'm doing is separated or moved the things that want to be together closer together. And yeah, so yeah, what I wanted to do is known user, if it contains the key, if it contains yeah, so what I want to move this up. So here I want to say, well, let me just do this. No, what am I doing? I have to assign this result, right? So copy this, make it as a first thing here. So if user is blank, then offline, else if is known user, else if, let's see, this should still work despite the duplication. Then I can remove this duplication. I think that should work. And now I can say here not is known. All right, so that seems fine. And let's check this in. Well, I think I can just amend the previous commit, because that's sort of part of what I was doing. And now what I can do is I can extract some functions basically. So for example, I want to start aligning these levels of abstraction, because here I'm working with some sort of primitives and with dealing with data, with details, and also, like, for example, here I have people for user ID, which is a map that has that I'm dealing with directly. So maybe I can just do this. I can extract function is a known user, or maybe first move this thing outside of the function, and then, so why I did that, because I want to extract a function for this that is known user that will deal with this map directly. I think it is visible. Yeah, it is visible. So this map, I want to deal with this map directly without passing it here inside. So it could have been function inside function. I don't really like that. I know it is possible in Kotlin. I don't like that. So let's convert these to block body. I think it makes the code easier to read and understand. And that should still work. And now I think what else I want to do, I can inline this. And then I want to now here, this is what bothers me. What bothers me is that I am here dealing with these people for user ID get value, which is again something that deals with this this map. And the map, I see it as a very low level of abstraction. It's some sort of it's details, it's data, it contains data inside, and it does this operation get value. And I want to that's sort of very low level. I want my to express that with some sort of my domain things. I want to extract functions for them, for that thing. But on the other hand, I also want to, I see that this data that I'm having here, if I move it closer to where it is being used, it wants to be together, it belongs together. And also then these people get value. If I extract a function for it, load people for user ID, again it deals on the same, it works on the same same map. So all these things, let me undo all these things, all these three things belong together into some sort of one entity. So I can see clearly that these want to be a standalone class. But also here, this check for is known user, load people for this if else's here. Maybe I want to deal with it, because especially about this else thingy here. So that's sort of exceptional thing, and it's exceptional because what happens if I want to get a result, but the user ID is not blank, and like it does not get into any of those. So it's the compiler is not letting me continue without this, for example, thingy. All right. So it clearly tells me that, but also this get value is some sort of it guarantees to me if I do get value, it says that it's gonna return to me a non-null thing, but I know the nature of the map says that a key can have a null value. So I want to deal with that case too. And apparently, I think also when I say, let me just do this. Still extract this into class. Well, maybe first make sure everything works. It does. I want to check this in. Moved the, well, how about amend the previous command? Because that's also moving the things closer together. And now what I can do a class in memory people. I don't know whether I wanna. I'm just gonna use catalog here as well because I have that naming convention introduced for the user catalog, for the post catalog, so people catalog can be something. Because maybe I want to keep my users as well, the people in the users catalog as well, but I'm not sure right now. So I would rather go ahead and use this duplication and then see how it wants to evolve and maybe combine the two together. So instead of now optimizing beforehand and thinking about those things, I would like to first see how this class will work and then whether it wants to be together with the other one or not. So in memory people catalog, and I'll just copy paste these things. Let's for once make this private because it bothers the hell out of me. Cool. Now these functions are unused. And what I can do is here use that one. That should still work. Oh, these are private. Wait, my mistake. Right. And instead of committing now again, I'll just skip the commit and do the same here. So what I've done, I'm just introducing duplication like crazy here, but that's deliberate. I do want to introduce that duplication. Introduced both logical and physical duplication deliberately. Why? Because what's the logical duplication? Every time I call this function, I create twice the instance of the in-memory people catalog. That's like far from being okay, but I want this duplication. So what I'm doing here is that it gives me, it tells me clearly that hey, this doesn't feel okay. This is something you want to refactor. But when I see now that this, let's first get rid of this being unused. So this is unused, and I don't know why, but the compiler tells me that this is still something that is being used, but it shouldn't. Oh. Let's back off everything. Let me see. Right. Now I want to put the same thing here as part of the introduction of the duplication. And now I amend the last commit. And now here, what I want to do is, now I can delete these unused things. And essentially this becomes unused. And these three are also becoming unused. Nice. Delete obsolete code. And now then that this is a class and I have these living functions inside, I'm thinking why, because this is in-memory people catalog, it essentially behaves as my backend, as something that this is sort of a test double that lives in memory, but I'm gonna extract a contract out of this later on when I'll have an implementation that talks to backend, and it represents business logic that will belong to my backend, something that my backend will do. And when I look at it, why, for example, I would bother about whether it is a known user or not in my code, right? So it should be something internal here. And essentially this load people for is a command. I say, hey, load these people for me. And it should either return result to me, which is list of friends, or it can blow up. It can say, no, I could not really return users to you. So it can just blow up with an exception or something. And if this is a backend, I would get HTTP exception or something like that, right? I'm not gonna get 200 for that. So I want to represent that sort of thing here. So what I will do, I would like to make this private, is known user, and this load people for will throw an exception in case, in negative cases. So also part of this decision, part of this reasoning is that this get value, again, the thing with the nullable thing that I mentioned a little bit before. So how can I do that is, well, here I can say return people for user ID. Instead of get value, I can do for user ID, and that will not compile, I guess, because this wants to return list of friends, but this might have a null as a value. So let's see. Yeah, so that's exactly what I was expecting. And what I can do is I can say if there is no so essentially this is the same check, is no known user. If it's not known user, I can throw backend exception. Yeah. So I can throw a backend exception. And that should still work. Because here I'm also checking, I'm still having these ifs and stuff. And now what I can do, I can replace these things. So instead of is known user, checking is known user, how can I do this in baby steps? That's what I'm thinking right now. So maybe here I can say try in memory people catalog, load people for user ID, and then return people state loaded, and that's gonna be replace this occurrence. So again, what I'm doing, I will replace the clients of the old code to use the new code, make sure everything still works, and remove the old code. So that's something that comes to my mind right now. So load people for this is gonna be the people for user ID. And then I can say here people for user ID, and then catch backend exception, and then here I would say people state backend error. It's the same name, so I should result 1, let's say. That should still work. It should not change anything. Let's run the tests. And now I want to assign the result 1. Okay, it doesn't work because it says the offline is not covered. So back off. Make sure everything still works. Now this offline should also, I think this user is blank. It is also belonging that check here, all right? So because the data is here, everything like all the checks and dealing with the data is here, and this check essentially is here. So I think the same check from above belongs here as well. So I can do I can say here if user ID is blank, then throw this is the guard clause, right? I can say connection unavailable exceptions. This is the way to express in this test double. This is the way to express backend like offline exception. I can leverage this later on when I'll be writing the contract. I can leverage that to actually write the real implementation to handle the to cover that. For example, if I'm offline, to convert that into my domain exception, which is the connection unavailable exception. This what I've done now, this if that I've added here should be I'm still calling this code, that's why I'm calling with if user ID is blank, this is still getting executed, that's why. Let's try. That's the thing. So let's do baby steps. So what I've done here is moved the well, use exceptions, domain exceptions to describe unusual or unexpected behavior. So why now this works? Because for example, this when I call load people at this point is being called here from a safe from the safe places. So these ifs are already checking for that. That's why it works without these exceptions being thrown. Now if I do add this code that was there before, so now I'm gonna migrate the clients. come on. Now I'm gonna migrate the clients. And what I would say is here also catch the offline exception. Connection unavailable exception. And in that case, I would say the people state is going to be offline. So all I do is just add this additional catch, but again, this result is not being used. My tests are still working. They are green because this result is like, I'm doing the calls, but it's of no consequence at all. So if I replace now result 1, it should still work again because this handles all the situations now. And what I've done, I've migrated my clients, which is like load people thingy. I've migrated that to use this new piece of code rather than this old piece of code. And now I can delete this old piece of code, and that should still work. And I can also rename this to result. And now I have sort of simpler things. Now let's check that in. So what I can do is use domain exceptions to describe unexpected behavior, handle unexpected behavior using domain exceptions. And now I think, because as I said, this is the view model, this is the load people, the first thing that we are calling in our API. And now here we are, this is duplication that we want to deal with. This is something that we want to push out. And this is also something that we want to push out. And now, as we can see, this is known user is no longer being used. So what we can do is, well, we can leverage that here. We can say if is known user, then yeah, but I think we are anyway checking that here. Let's check that in. Removed obsolete code. Now this class can be extracted. In-memory people catalog will go into people package. No, it will go into my domain. User post, exceptions, timeline, so maybe people. Yeah, so one thing to notice here is that I am adding this in memory, like these are, whenever there is in memory thing, yeah, I'm adding, that's a test double, but I'm adding those in my production code, in my production packages. Later on, I'll leverage those to create contract tests and write implementation that will talk to real backend. At that moment, I'm gonna move these test doubles in the tests only, so they will no longer be available in the production code. So that's something that is interesting too, because I don't need them in the production code. If I need them, I can keep them, but yeah, we'll see what's gonna be the need. If there is a need, I can just leave them there. And next, so let's see what we can do additionally here. I think for now it is just fine. It is fine, but we want to push this data out. We want to push this data out from here, but first we have to deal with this duplication, because if we push it out, it will appear here. We want that to appear in the tests. So, but we are already 1 hour. Wow, 1 hour and 10 minutes in. So we should maybe wrap this up. Let's see. I will extract a function out of this. So this will be a load people for user ID. I will make this as a block body. Cool. And now here, what this load people is the function of my view model, where I will be doing also thread switching and that kind of things. When I say thread switching, I'm gonna add dispatchers and be able to switch the dispatcher to do this sort of heavy operation, loading friends in a thread that is different than the main thread. So in a sense, that's gonna be the responsibility of my view model, and I want to push then this thing into a another class, that the responsibility of that class will be to actually reach out to the catalog, which is the backend. Right now this catalog is in memory, but it's gonna be a backend. Reach out there. If the backend returns results to me, convert those results to something understandable for my user, for the client, for the view model basically. Or if there is an exception down there in that level, which is let's say my domain exception happened. Some exception happened that was translated to my domain exception. So maybe IO would be converted to connection unavailable, or some HTTP exception will be converted to my backend. And then this thing, this class where this method will belong, is actually converting those now my domain things into something understandable for my UI. That's what's my goal. Again, I've named those repositories so far. If we take a look at let's say people, no, in my domain, let's see the people in well, in the posts, I have post repository. Those are not essentially repositories. They are more sort of I don't know, regular classes. There is a just it's always the naming is super hard. So it's something that, as I said, it just translates something to my something from my domain to something. It translates that to something understandable for my UI, because I don't want to deal with exceptions in my UI. The view model is part of the UI. I don't want to deal with exceptions in there. I could definitely come up with a different way to describe these results. Or add different abstraction, one more layer or something like that. But that's not my goal. This is rather simple application, and that's why I like, we can criticize the thing that these are not repositories, but I couldn't find better names. So essentially there is a layer where I'm doing this translation because I need to inline the abstraction levels, but again, I named them repository, and that's not the best name. However, let's do this. So people repository, and I'll move this function inside here. It should still work because I don't really use it right now, but here I can say people repository load people for, and that should work. So now my function, my local function, I can safely delete because it's no longer used. And now what I can do is, well, let's check. Let's don't check everything in. Maybe just one by one the things. So first this, extracted the class into a separate file. And now this one will be introduced a class to hold the responsibility of translating domain data into UI data. And of course I can extract this one into, so people repository is gonna be part of my domain people. And let's say extracted class into separate file. Now what I have to do is deal with this duplication here, because every time I load people I create new instance of the people repository. That's not nice. So that's one duplication inside there. I do have another duplication, which is the in-memory people catalog, and I have to deal with that duplication too. So let's write that down. Okay, my to-do. First, deal with logical duplication. Deal with logical duplication. This thingy. And also inside there I have the in-memory people catalog. And then when I deal with that duplication, I can move the data from this thingy up the call stack. So I can say here, move the data from up the call stack. And then what's gonna be left for this will be to introduce here, like introduce coroutines, make sure that we are switching the thread here, and then that we are delivering the UI states, all the UI states that are required into the for loading the people, like loading the actual states, the errors, and that kind of things. So then we can proceed working on the UI. So basically, I'll keep that for the next episode because I'm 1 hour 20 minutes in. So which is quite long. So I'm gonna do what we are gonna do in the next episode is, as I said, we already have lots of things to do with this, and then, as I said, introduce coroutines and deliver all states to observers. That's gonna be it. This is what we are gonna be working on next episode. I think we are more than enough for this one. Thank you so much for the time and attention. I'm sorry that it took so long, but hopefully it's gonna be interesting to watch, because we struggled a little bit with these refactorings, but it was really nice refactoring that we've done. So yeah, thank you so much for the time and attention. I'll catch you in the next episode. Cheers.